Welcome, everyone, to this explainer. Right now, there is a quiet but absolutely massive shift in global alliances happening, literally fracturing our world map into two competing giants. So if you want to understand the deep geopolitical undercurrents that are actively shaping our supply chains, our economies, and, well, our collective future, you are exactly in the right place. Let's get into it. It really begs the question, are we witnessing the birth of a new Iron Curtain? For decades, a single superpower and its allies pretty much dominated the global map and essentially dictated the rules of engagement. But today? Today, we're seeing the historic, highly integrated military might of NATO colliding head-on with the rapidly expanding economic gravity of BRICS. It's a fundamental restructuring of the world order, and nations across the globe are increasingly finding themselves forced to choose a side. To make sense of this new geopolitical chessboard, we're going to break this down into four parts. First, the foundations of power. Second, the financial front line. Third, expanding the chessboard. And finally, future flashpoints. Okay, starting with Section 1, foundations of power. We're looking at military might versus economic weight. To really understand where the world is heading, we first need to decode how these two alliances operate, because at their core, they are fundamentally different beasts. Let's look at NATO first, which is of course anchored by the immense military and financial weight of the United States. Founded in the aftermath of World War II, it operates entirely as a defensive military pact, and it is built around one ultimate standard-issue shield, Article 5. This collective self-defense clause essentially mandates that an attack on one member is an attack on all. It's a deeply integrated, highly standardized military machine spanning over 30 nations across the Western Hemisphere and Europe, acting as this massive deterrent against conventional warfare. Now, contrast that deeply entrenched military shield with BRICS, originally formed in 2006. This is absolutely not a formal military alliance. There is no Article 5 here, there are no shared military command structures. Instead, it's a powerful economic coalition designed specifically to champion the global South and to challenge the Western-led global order from the ground up. They aren't trying to match NATO tank for tank. They are playing an entirely different, long-term economic game. And the sheer scale of that economic game is frankly staggering. We are talking about a bloc that represents over 40% of the global population and a full quarter of the global economy. That is massive. They are leveraging this incredible collective demographic and market power with a highly focused mission. Their goal is to break the West's historic monopoly on global finance, trade, and political influence, basically utilizing their combined consuming power and vast labor forces to shift the entire global center of gravity. Which brings us to Section 2, the financial front line, or the battle for the dollar. This is arguably the most critical front in this new Cold War. It's being fought not with tanks or aircraft, but with currency, banking infrastructure, and trade agreements. So, since World War II, the US dollar has been the undisputed default for international trade, global oil purchases, and central bank reserves. Because it completely dominates global clearing systems like the SWIFT payment network, the United States holds unprecedented geopolitical leverage. Think about it. If a nation steps out of line, the US can essentially freeze their economy overnight. We saw this power send absolute shockwaves through the global South recently when hundreds of billions of dollars in Russian foreign reserves were frozen instantly. It proved to other nations that their sovereign assets could literally be seized at the click of a button. Recognizing that relying on a currency controlled by a competing geopolitical bloc is a massive strategic vulnerability, BRICS, led prominently by China and Russia, is executing a highly calculated strategy of de-dollarisation. The goal here is straightforward but ambitious, to proactively shield their economies from those exact types of devastating financial sanctions, insulating their internal markets from Western leverage. They're doing this by building a parallel ecosystem, and they're rolling it out in three distinct phases. First, they are increasingly bypassing the dollar entirely to settle massive cross-border trade deals in their own local currencies. Second, they've established the new development bank, setting it up as a direct, powerful rival to Western institutions like the World Bank and the IMF. And third, they're actively researching a unified, gold-backed BRICS digital currency. Step by meticulous step, they are attempting to dismantle the West's absolute most powerful tool of economic warfare. Let's move into Section 3, expanding the chessboard. As global tension continues to rise, both of these massive alliances are racing at a totally unprecedented pace to secure new territory, vital allies, and critical resources.
These recent additions are fundamentally redrawing the strategic map. NATO is heavily reinforcing Europe by officially adding Finland and Sweden. Military analysts point out that this move essentially turns the Baltic Sea into a NATO lake, pushing highly advanced Western militaries right up to Russia's critical borders. Meanwhile, BRICS is expanding its global footprint in a completely different direction. They've officially brought in major Middle Eastern energy producers like Iran and the UAE, alongside highly strategic African giants like Egypt and Ethiopia.
This expansion isn't random at all. It's a highly calculated, aggressive play for absolute resource dominance. By bringing these specific energy-rich and geographically crucial nations into the fold, the BRICS bloc now controls a massive percentage of the world's daily oil production, not to mention key shipping corridors. And with over 40 more nations formally expressing interest in joining, BRICS is actively attempting to consolidate the entirety of the global south into an undeniable, unified counterweight to Western influence. That brings us to our final section, future flashpoints. Choke points, and cherished resources. To see where this deep ideological and economic divide might actually lead to severe global disruption or physical conflict, we have to look directly at the physical map and the hard realities of global supply chains. 80%. Just let that number sink in. That staggering figure represents the total amount of all global trade that travels by sea. All of those manufactured goods, vital fuels, and raw materials keeping the modern world running, they are forced through a handful of incredibly narrow, highly vulnerable geographic waterways. A prime example of this vulnerability is the Strait of Malacca. This incredibly narrow corridor between Malaysia and Indonesia handles nearly a quarter of all global trade. But more importantly, the vast majority of China's critical oil imports absolutely must pass through this single choke point. If NATO allies were to blockade the strait during a broader conflict, China's economy would face immediate strangulation. This scenario is widely known as the Malacca dilemma, and it highlights a massive, unavoidable strategic vulnerability for the BRICS powerhouse. The second major flashpoint is the race for the future. We're talking about lithium, cobalt, rare earth elements, and advanced semiconductor chips. These specific assets aren't just nice to have, they are absolutely required for the global transition to green energy, the production of electric vehicles, and the very future of advanced computing and AI. Quite simply, whoever controls these complex supply chains controls the 21st century. And right now, the West faces a stark and incredibly challenging reality. China currently controls the vast majority of processing capabilities for rare earth minerals, and BRICS is aggressively expanding its direct influence over resource-rich areas like South America's Lithium Triangle and vital mining hubs deep in Africa. Meanwhile, the Western alliance relies heavily on delicate, deeply intertwined supply chains running right through contested, highly militarized zones like the South China Sea and Taiwan. BRICS' calculated expansion actively threatens to lock the West out of the essential building blocks of modern, next-generation technology. So, we are rapidly moving away from a world dominated by a single superpower and actively entering a highly fragmented, multipolar era fraught with real risk. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this final thought to chew on. Will the established, deeply integrated military and financial might of NATO hold the line? Or will the raw resource wealth, critical supply chains, and massive population of the expanding BRICS bloc rewrite the fundamental rules of the global economy? I'd love to hear your strategic analysis on this, so drop your thoughts in the comments below. And thank you so much for joining me to decode the map today. Welcome everyone to this explainer.